I now reconvene the general session. Will the recording secretary please call the roll?
Lynette Brown,
Here.
Catherine Williams Brown,
Here.
Jose Cardenas,
Here.
Juan Cruz,
Here.
Christopher Davis,
Here.
Michael De La Torre, Marisol De La Torre Escobedo. Here. Anna Marie Francois, Makita Gwino Shire.
Here.
Megan Gross,
Here.
Johanna Howard,
Here.
Susan Aradia, Terry Jackson,
Here.
Bonnie Clark,
Present.
Monica Martinez,
Here.
Shireen Parbury,
Here.
David Simmons, Tina Sloan,
Here.
Kimberly Wise Smith,
Present.
David Simmons.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Fantastic. I'd like to remind members of the public that about the process to provide public comment. The committee chair will announce when the public comment period is open during the presentation of the agenda item and ask for anyone who wishes to comment to notify the meeting moderator. Individuals who attend the meeting at the commission office will need to submit a request to address the commission card to the meeting moderator. The meeting moderator will notify the individual when it's their turn to speak. At that time, the individual will be able to approach the microphone and share their comment. Individuals who join the meeting via the Zoom webcast will need to click on the raise hand icon to inform the meeting moderator that they'd like to speak on the item. The meeting moderator will notify the individual when it's their turn to speak by calling their Zoom ID. Please remember that the Zoom ID is the name used when logging into the meeting. At that time, the individual will be prompted to unmute their microphone and will be able to share their comment. Please note the Zoom ID name used by the member of the public to join the Zoom meeting will be displayed to the public when the individual provides public comment. Individuals who join the meeting via the U.S. toll-free number will need to press *9 on their phone to inform the meeting moderator that they'd like to speak on the item. The moderator will notify the individual it's their turn to speak by calling their phone number and will allow them to unmute their telephone. At that time, the individual will be prompted to press *6 and will be able to share their comment. Please note, only a partial phone number will be displayed to the public when the individual provides public comment. I'll now recess the general session and move to the Professional Practices Committee. Commissioner Hartwig, will you please convene the committee?
I now convene the Professional Practices Committee. The committee has one item today. Item 5A is the Division of Professional Practices Annual Workload Report, fiscal year 2021 to 2022. Rachel Gritzofi will present this item. Ms. Gritzofi, will you please begin?
Thank you. Good morning, commissioners.
Morning.
My item is for the annual report for the 21-22 fiscal year. This agenda presents the annual report for all of our discipline workload for the past fiscal year. With a little bit of background, in addition to administering the laws and rules governing the issuing of credentials and approving educator preparation programs, the Commission on Teacher Credentialing enforces professional conduct standards. To ensure a high level of public confidence in California teachers and other credentialed public school employees, DPP monitors the moral fitness and professional conduct of credential applicants and holders. The Commission has authority to discipline an applicant or holder for fitness-related misconduct. Disciplinary action may be taken based on applicants or holders' immoral or unprofessional conduct, evident unfitness for service, refusal to obey laws regulating certificated duties, unjustified refusal to perform under an employment contract, addiction to intoxicating beverages or controlled substances, commission of any act of moral turpitude or intentional fraud or deceit in an application. DPP collects information concerning alleged misconduct and presents the information to the Committee of Credentials. The 7 members of the committee are appointed by the Commission to review alleged misconduct. The committee includes 3 credential holders employed in public schools, 1 elementary teacher, 1 secondary teacher, 1 administrator. 1 school board member, and 3 public members. The committee meets once each month for 3 days at the commission's offices in Sacramento. It has the legal authority to close an investigation where the evidence does not support the allegations or to recommend discipline where the evidence shows probable cause to believe the allegations. All disciplinary recommendations made by the committee are subject to appeal by the credential applicant or holder and final approval by the commission. DPP obtains jurisdiction to initiate an investigation of misconduct and/or moral fitness when it receives information, including but not limited to the following: a report of employment action taken by an employing school district as a result of misconduct or why allegations of misconduct are pending, a complaint made under penalty of perjury by someone with firsthand knowledge of misconduct, a report of criminal convictions from the Department of Justice, or from self-disclosure on an application for credential. The following will be our annual numbers for that information. While COVID continued to impact DPP's overall workload, we began the year on a low of 2,058 cases in July of 21, but we steadily increased to a high of 2,685 cases ending in May 2022, before we ended the fiscal year with 2,681 cases. Our monthly case totals have increased and are currently in the pre-COVID normal range of 2,600 to 2,800. The number of cases that we opened was 4,994. This averages about 416 per month, which meets the normal range of 400 to 500 cases opened each month. In comparison to the 4 fiscal years, DPP opened an average of 4,942 cases per fiscal year, or an average of 412 cases per month. DPP receives reports of misconduct from several sources, including applicants who self-disclose, school district reports, and records of arrest and prosecution, or rap sheets from DOJ. We opened more cases than the last 2 fiscal years, our last 2 COVID years, but is still slightly below pre-COVID 2017, 2018, and 18-19 totals. Therefore, the number of cases opened by report type also increased from the 2 prior years. In comparison, 2021 increases by report types include 224 more cases involving applicants, a more significant increase of 735 more applicant RAP cases, and 214 more RAP cases, and 159 more school district cases. Affidavit complaints and breach of contract reports also increased when compared to 2021. This reflects our overall increase of 1,502 cases this past fiscal year. While COVID-19 has still had an impact on school district notifications, we noted in last year's reports that we expected to see increases in notifications from school districts as the state reopened. And we have seen that impact come through as our case totals have increased this past year. New cases opened by designation indicate whether an individual under review is a new or current applicant, or whether the person holds or held a valid credential. In 21-22, the overall number of open cases by designation increased in each of the 4 categories when compared to the last fiscal year, as shown in the graph below. The first 2 categories, applicants and app holders, increased by 114 and 35 cases respectively when compared to 2021. First-time applicants and holders consist of the highest number of cases on the annual basis, which increased substantially by 767 and 586 cases this year, respectively. Our total cases opened by designation was 4,994. What types of misconduct were alleged? During the 21-22 fiscal year, each type of misconduct category increased in comparison to the prior fiscal year. Alcohol-related offenses remained the highest misconduct type and included a significant increase of 641 cases from the prior year. All categories saw an increase in number of cases: other crimes, serious crimes and felonies, drugs, non-sexual crimes, non-sexual child crimes, and child sexual crimes, including adult crimes that are also sexual related. The cases reviewed by the Committee of Credentials in 21-22, DPP completed 851 initial review cases, which is the lowest number of such cases completed in the last 5 fiscal years. And this is due to COVID and the number of total caseload coming into the system. This is due to the overall reduction of open cases, but this number is expected to increase as the growing number of cases open this fiscal year will allow workload in the pipeline to increase. In March 21, the overall and pending caseload had been reduced to a point where DPP had fewer than 90 cases pending by the initial review deadline. In June 21, management reduced the monthly initial review cases to the committee to 81, or as many cases as possible. DPP anticipated that when schools and school districts began to reopen and applications returned to normal levels, the overall workload would increase. The DPP is starting to see more normal levels of workload returning, which will allow the committee to review 80 to 90 plus cases per month, above the 21-22 average of 71. In June, we ended the fiscal year with 83 cases at initial review. Formal review is the cases directly, the number of initial review cases directly impacts the number of formal review cases. The formal review is the second stage in the review process of those cases not closed during initial review. At the formal review stage, an individual can request an opportunity to appear and answer questions before the committee members. At the end of the fiscal year, 72 cases went through formal review, a total of 786 for the year. One factor that continues to reduce the overall caseload is the number of consent cases presented to the committee monthly. The reduced caseload in 21-22 remains at COVID-19 levels, but as workload is increasing, DPP expects consent calendar cases will also increase. There's been a slight increase this fiscal year compared to 2021. The committee reviewed an average of 74 cases per month on the consent calendar, including a high of 96 during the June meeting. Cases closed by commission delegation to staff. In 2012 and 2013, the commission adopted policies that delegated authority to staff to close cases that met very specific criteria. For example, the commission adopted a policy that allowed staff to close cases that involved a single alcohol-related offense that did not impact children or schools. Staff closed 1,076 cases in the fiscal year 21-22. No jurisdiction cases involve cases where the commission is unable to obtain formal jurisdiction. By law, the committee must have both initial and formal jurisdiction before the committee can make a recommendation for discipline. These types of cases typically involve an arrest with no charges filed or an arrest where charges have been dismissed. Staff closed 522 cases in the fiscal year 21-22 based on this delegation. Vehicle code violation cases involve specific minor infractions or misdemeanors under vehicle code. Violations of this type include driving without a license and driving on a suspended license. The exceptions to this policy include when the violation involves a child or school property or adverse publicity impacting the local community. Staff closed 64 of these type of cases in 21-22. Expired credential cases involve cases where the educator no longer holds a valid credential and has no application pending. Cases of this type are flagged in the system and reviewed if the individual submits a new application. The expired credential policy contains 4 exceptions: allegations of sexual misconduct, crimes against children, reports filed by a school district, and actions taken by other licensing agencies. Below are the number of cases closed based on our commission's expired credential policy, which was 77 total for the year, 5 for June. The single offense alcohol and the vehicle code policies are the highest classifications of cases that we process with commission's delegation. We increased by 295 and 27 cases respectively. The other cases, the other categories still remain at lower than normal levels. Adverse actions. When adverse actions fall into two categories, mandatory and discretionary. Mandatory actions are actions required by statute. A criminal conviction for a specified sex offense, drug offense, or certain other specified crime require the commission to mandatorily revoke all credentials or mandatorily deny any pending application. Mandatory actions are placed on the commission's consent calendar as an informal item at the next scheduled commission meeting. The commission processed a total of 130 mandatory actions last year, 92 revocations, and 38 denials. Discretionary actions are actions taken following an order by the commission in cases where the committee recommended an adverse action. The committee's recommendation may be accepted by the credential holder or applicant, or it may be appealed. On appeal, an administrative hearing is held before a final action is taken by the commission. A comparison of the numbers of discretionary actions is shown in the table below. We had a total of 529 actions, discretionary actions taken by commission last year, with 243 revocations, 63 denials, 175 suspensions, 6 private admonitions, and 42 public approvals. The total number of adverse actions slightly decreased from in 21-22 compared to the last fiscal year. At the formal review stage, the committee may close its investigation or make a recommendation for adverse action. The person under review for misconduct is provided notice of the recommendation and has the right to request an administrative hearing. If the person requests an administrative hearing, the commission is represented by the Office of the Attorney General, the OAG, and the matter is heard by the administrative law judge, who issues a proposed decision to the commission. The commission can adopt the proposed decision, reduce the penalty, or reject the proposed decision and call for the transcript. After review of the transcript, the commission can adopt the proposed decision or issue its own decision. The average number of open cases assigned to the OAG for representation has remained steady over the last 4 fiscal years and is shown in the graph below. At the end of the fiscal year, the commission had 143 cases assigned at the attorney's Office of the Attorney General. The OAG adjudicates the commission's cases by administrative hearing, default, withdrawal by the educator, settlement, or declining to prosecute. The chart below summarizes the OAG's adjudication of cases for the commission. 6 declined to prosecute, 52 consent determinations, 0 deceased educators, 45 proposed ALJ decisions, 7 default decisions, 15 withdrew their request for administrative hearings. 1 case was withdrawn at the statement of issues level, 1 recalled, and 8 other. In providing support to the OAG, DPP's investigative unit locates victims and witnesses, as well as obtains affidavits and other types of documents to assist DAGs in preparation for hearing to the clear and convincing evidentiary standard. The investigative unit began 21-22 with 16 pending OAG investigative requests from the previous fiscal year and received 68 this year. We completed 76 and ended the fiscal year with 8 pending requests as shown below. Reinstatements of previously revoked credentials. The commission hears petitions for reinstatements as required by the Administrative Procedures Act in closed session to determine whether petitioners whose credentials were revoked are now fit to hold a credential. In a petition for reinstatement, the petitioner has the burden of proof to show that he or she has rehabilitated from the misconduct that led to the revocation. During the past 5 years, the number of petitions for reinstatement per year has remained consistent. The commission granted 12 and denied 22 as shown below. The next portion of our annual report is related to the prior Bureau of State audits. And it's the timeliness and action of our cases. In response to the 2011 Bureau of State audits, staff followed a methodology used by the state auditor to measure the timeliness of 30 random cases completed during 21-22. While we used a random sample of cases closed by the division or reviewed the committee, staff used a more rigorous sample by using only cases reviewed by the committee. As indicated in the chart below, DPP has made significant improvements in timeliness when compared to the findings of the BSA audit. The average time it takes to open a case was reduced from 128 days to 4. The average time it takes for the division to take its first action on a case was also reduced from 103 days to 14. The total average time for a case to process was reduced from 683 to 366 days. While the median time was reduced from 720 days to 337. The educator discipline timeliness chart shown below details all of the current milestones compared to the 2011 audit. Again, the average for us to open a case was 4 days. The average to create a first records contact to an outside source, court or law enforcement, was 14 days. The letter of inquiry, which is the initial review, was 178 days from the time of case opening. And the rest of the dates are statutory timelines. So the formal meeting is always set 60 days after the initial. So that timeline is about 83 days. And then the date of recommendation, the recommendation action is 63 days. And then the average time it takes for an entire case to process is 366 through action. In conclusion, 21-22 DPP continued to process its caseload in a timely manner. Factors that caused a lower level of overall workload as compared to pre-COVID numbers include staff completing less than normal 90 initial review cases per month to present to the committee, and DPP having received fewer reports of misconduct. The year began with 2,058 total cases. The total number of cases increased steadily during the year to a high of 2,685 in May before we ended our fiscal year on 2,681. The return of normal caseload and receipt of slightly fewer reports of misconduct resulted in the following. The number of cases was 4,994. We averaged 4,942 in the last 4 fiscal years. The average of 416 cases open per month is also reaching the pre-COVID-19 normal range of 500 cases. Single alcohol offense and vehicle code violation cases, which are 2 of the 3 categories of cases that the commission has delegated staff to close, the other being no jurisdiction cases, have increased, and consent calendar cases increased by 92 compared to the last fiscal year. The 21-22 highlights also include, as stated above, the monthly caseload ended in the normal range of 2,600 to 2,800. Division staff completed 851 initial review cases, or approximately 71 cases per month. The normal 2 to 3 month pending initial review workload remained reduced, which are cases ready for committee's review. The workload is expected to reach and remain at normal levels beginning in mid-22-23. Staff processed a significant increase of 1,502 cases from last fiscal year. The investigative unit completed 76 investigative requests for the OAG in partnership with the Commission's in-house OAG liaison attorney and had an ending balance of 8 requests. And DPP continued to maintain its significant improvements in timeliness when compared to the 2011-2012 BSA audit. I do expect the number of initial review cases presented to committee to fluctuate at least during the first half of 22-23, but return to a consistent number of cases in the second half of the fiscal year. Management anticipates the overall caseload will increase and fluctuate during peak times of the school year, in line with historical trends and when educators have typically submitted their applications for credentials when classes are in session. Despite the previous disruptions from COVID-19, Commission staff is pleased to report that DPP continues to fulfill its statutory responsibilities of protecting the safety of school children and due process of California educators. And those guys showed up just in time, didn't they?
Thank you so much, Ms. Kritzofi, and for persisting through the disruption.
Yeah.
We will now open for public comment. If there are members of the public that would like to give a presentation, please notify the meeting moderator by submitting a request card or clicking on the raise hand icon if participating through Zoom, or pressing *9 if participating by phone. Recording secretary, are there any public comments?
We have no public comments.
Thank you. The public comment period for this item is now closed. Do commissioners have any questions or comments on this item? And maybe someone can help me with Zoom if there are commissioners on Zoom who have comments. Commissioner Simmons.
I just want to thank staff for putting together this really excellent report. And it, the work that you guys do, you're sort of the unsung heroes of the commission, because it's not all of the shiny, fun work that some of the other departments do. And I just want you to know how much we appreciate you and your whole department.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you.
Do other commissioners have comments or questions? Great. Commissioner Cardenas.
Good morning. Thank you again for this report. Very, very detailed. The work that you do, and on our end, what we're able to see, it's pretty remarkable what all of you are doing under these circumstances as well. I think one of the concerns that I had that you presented was in regards to breach of contract. I noticed that's been going up. I think I've seen a trend just even from our district and from our county, where people will move away and go to another district. Is there any type of outreach that is possibly being done to maybe inform some of our newer candidates or some of our newer educators that are going into the profession, to let them know or to have them understand contracts? Because I think right now in the times that we're living, people are able to move from job to job, or there's a lot of openings. And maybe this is not something directed to you, but it is something that I know I've seen, that people are leaving the profession, or people are looking or have other opportunities, right? Seeing a lot of stipends that are going around. So I wonder if that's contributing to the breach of contracts.
I don't know the specific reasons why folks are reported for breach of contract. The school districts have the ability to report under 4420, but they aren't required to report under 4420. And maybe the conversation at the employment level and the school district level regarding contracts it would be, I don't know that DPP can do any outreach in that sense. We're the receiving end of the response. So I think the focus could be at the school district level and the employment level for outreach in those areas. That would help applicants and educators understand the process of the contract and how it's applied, and what would require notification to us, or during breach of contract, what that would entail.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Great question. Commissioner Sloan? Chair Sloan?
Yep, thanks. Thanks for that question, Commissioner Cardenas. I was also curious about that, and this is the reason, one reason why these reports are so important, because it gives us trends that we can then respond to as a field. And I'm not sure, as you said, DPP can do anything, but we can take this information and we can certainly let the field know. And I think in particular, let preparation programs know what is happening, because prior to candidates going and negotiating contracts, there should be an opportunity for them to really understand what that means and what breach of contract means and what the ramifications could be. So if we can do, when we do some of our alerts to the field, we can show them the numbers and offer suggestions for what preparation programs might do to help.
Thank you.
Commissioner Simmons?
CCAC is coming up in a couple of weeks. And in the past, I know that you guys have done a session where I believe this has come up. Are you guys going to be talking to the field about this issue there?
We are scheduled for CCAC. Both our fingerprinting unit and our discipline unit will be available on, I believe it's Wednesday the 2nd.
Can you say what CCAC is?
Sorry, I only know it by CCAC. So
Okay, it's it is a group of the
Credential.
credential counselors and analysts of California.
Yes.
So all of the credential counselors that work in school districts and county offices of education and educator preparation programs convene. It's close to 1,000 people who convene here in Sacramento annually to, and their job is to know our rules and regulations to a fine point of detail. It's one of the best interfaces we have with the larger community. And so it's a place where we do engage in this kind of conversation and make presentations and hear a lot from the field. If anybody can find a loophole, I'm looking at Commissioner Simmons because he's really a genius at that. It would be this community, and that helps us really strengthen what we do. It's a really important part of our communication strategy with the field.
Commissioner, oh, who's on the, I can't quite see who's on the. Commissioner De La Torre.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I had a question about the data. Is there any way, you mentioned that it was consistent? Some of the numbers are consistent with previous years, but I'm just wondering if the rates are also consistent. Is there any way to see the ratio between the number of cases relative to the number of credentials that are out, or educators?
I'm going to clarify your question just a bit. Do you mean the number of the ratio? Can you pinpoint the statistic that you're asking about?
It was more in general, but like for the formal review cases, actually, no, it was the one about, it's in general for all of the tables. It's just easier for me to see if it's a ratio increase. So, for example, if 10% of educators consistently every year, then I would see if that raised to 21 year, it would make a difference. But if the number may remain the same, depending on how many teachers have left the profession. So if I can see the ratios, or the one that I was looking at were the numbers, it was the petitions for reinstatement, for example. So I was looking at you mentioned that it was consistent. They're in the 30s, I see that, or close to 30. But I see that the number to grant and number to deny ratio is quite different. And also, I don't see that relative to the total number of credentials that are in the state of California. So that would be data that would be interesting for me to look at, just to see the relative rates.
Madam Chair, this might be the kind of data question that we need to do a little bit more work on and come back
Sure.
to you
Yeah.
with?
Yeah.
So let's take that question and feed it into a future report.
Yes.
But I see that Director Scooble has come to the table.
Yeah, while we don't have that specific data, I did want to share that in the same 6-month period, we processed 170,177 applications. So that can give you a high level idea of the numbers that we're talking about. That was our total application processing volume for the 6-month period that ends August 31st of 2022.
Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for that question, Commissioner De La Torre. Did I have another Commissioner Heredia? Commissioner Heredia and then Commissioner Brown?
Question on the CCAC. It is the first week in November. I was just trying to get the conference. I was just trying to get a timeline.
I believe it's the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th
Okay.
of November.
Okay. I just want to go back and make sure that my school district. Okay. Thank you.
Commissioner Brown?
Hi, thank you so much for this detailed report. I love a good table. And again, I want to echo what my colleagues have said about, this is kind of the unseen work, and we really appreciate all the effort that goes into what you do. So thank you so much. I want to toggle back to that notion of the breach of contract and seeing the increase in those and connect that to what some of the commissioners have been asking about data. And I'm not sure, my wondering is, are we able to sort of disaggregate that data of the breach of contract and find out, is it occurring in a certain region? Is it occurring in a certain subject area? Just digging a little deeper into the numbers so that we might better know how we might respond. I'm thinking a more targeted response might be more effective than just a general. I mean, I think a general, hey, let's talk to the field or preparation programs is always good. But if we're noticing a trend in a particular area, whether that's a geographic area or a credentialing area, and then I would be interested to know, does that correspond with what we know about shortage areas? So just being able to dig a little bit more into that to help inform how we might respond. Thank you.
Madam Chair,
Thank you.
could I just also say we are taking notes of the questions and things that you're interested in digging more deeply on, and we'll see what we can do.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
I have a few questions, but I want to see if there's anybody else who has any questions. Well, I want to echo the thanks for this very thorough report and also for the work that is done throughout the year by the Division of Professional Practices. We understand that one of the 3 pillars of work that the Commission does is the disciplinary work, along with all of the credential policy work and the actual issuing of credentials and the accreditation of training programs. This is the 3rd pillar of the work, and it's work that the commissioners know well, because when we go into closed session, this is the work that we are doing. But it isn't work that the public gets to hear very much about for confidentiality reasons. So it's especially important when we have these reports. And I am very pleased to hear that again this year, the pace of processing of cases, which is so important for protection of our school children, but also for protection of the rights of our credential holders, remains at a very good pace and an incredible improvement since the audit 11 years ago or whenever that was. I have just one or two questions. It sounds from the report and from your presentation that overall the expectation is that case levels will continue to rise and even out to pre-COVID levels.
Yes.
Are there any areas where you would expect a permanent change in terms of case levels, either more or fewer?
Our data seems to be very, as I started to dive into these statistics, this is my first report, of course, with these statistical numbers. So as I started to go through all of the past reports and review some of the data, it seems to be very consistent. And I expect that as we are watching our application numbers increase, that while we may have some peaks and increases, that our workload will remain stable and consistent throughout the process. And it will remain within these normals. We might have peaks that jump us ahead. And then as timing, our numbers are relative to some of the timing of the meetings. So when DPP is processing caseload and those recommendations have to move to commission for adoption, that timeline triggers when I can document that number as being a completed case. And so we have these transitions of a statutory timeline. And so those cause our numbers to do this at each month. But I expect them to be consistent. I don't see anything on our data right now that that I see will cause any sort of permanent number to increase or decrease. Our workload is a nice flow as it moves through the system. So no, I don't expect any permanent numbers to increase or decrease.
Thank you for that. And I want to thank my fellow commissioners for pointing out one piece of data I was also interested in about the breach of contract. I'm so happy to hear some ideas about following up on that. It will be also interesting to see whether, there has been movement based on COVID impact in so many different, in so many different industries. So perhaps that will level out. I had one other question about when, just for an education question, for when you talk about new cases opened by type of misconduct, the second largest number is listed as other crimes. Could you provide us some examples of what those other crimes are so that folks who aren't privy to looking at these cases might have an idea about what types of things what types of conduct we're talking about here?
Yes. Sorry, I wrote on my notes. So you're talking about the new cases opened by report type.
Yeah. Or but new cases opened by type of misconduct. So alcohol is first, and then you have a category of other crimes. I thought it might be useful to hear just a few examples of what that covers.
So other crimes are let me explain. This chart is a categorization of the type of the more egregious misconduct in a case. So when we're talking about other, it's a code in our casework that tells us that it could be a school district case. So breach of contract, these aren't crimes, but we have to document on our casework what we're talking about. So any misconduct that comes through the door, breach of contract, a school district notification, and that the allegations of that misconduct within the school district doesn't involve one of these other categories, it is categorized as other. So if a report comes in and it has a child crime or child misconduct listed, then it moves into a child crime category so that our staff knows the egregiousness of the crime within the case at a glance. So others are maybe a simple petty theft from the 90s. It may, nothing that's a felony, nothing that is a battery or a physical confrontation, no physical violence. They're categorized as cases that are not any of these other categories, which are consistent with severe crime, violent crime, child misconduct, sexual misconduct. And so if it doesn't rise to those categories, it's categorized as other.
Thank you. That is very helpful. my apologies, I didn't have this on. I'm asking a question about the cases assigned to OAG and how they are disposed of ultimately. Proposed ALG decisions 45. That means those are ALJ decisions that the commission ultimately adopts. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. So is there within this chart the number of ALJ decisions where the commission calls for the transcript, rejects the ALJ decision and makes its own decision? Is that within these numbers?
I would have to verify with legal counsel. I would prefer to.
Sure.
I would prefer to verify with legal counsel. These are categories out of the Office of the Attorney General. While I'm familiar with the process at the back end for what DPP process is, I would like to confirm that data within that category, just to ensure that I'm reporting correctly to you what you're asking.
Certainly.
So I will make a note of that and get back to you.
That's something I'm very interested in, and would be interested in information on that for the last 5 years as well, to see if there is any trend within that. And if this is not the appropriate report for some reason to include it, then perhaps there's some other way in which that could be.
Okay. So you're asking, just to recap, to make sure that I have your question very clear, you're asking if the cases in which the commission has recalled the transcript and you do not want to adopt the recommendation of the ALJ and you make your own determination, that category.
Correct. I'd like to know how many cases go through the ALJ process, but then we end up not adopting the ALJ decision. Okay, just my final question, and this is one I ask at every monthly report as well, is about whether you feel that staffing levels are adequate to maintain the quality and pace of work that the DPP needs to do.
I do believe that we are currently staffed to accommodate the increase in numbers to normal levels. As we've indicated previously, our initial review level is at a lower pace because our pipeline workload is at a lower caseload. So as those start to increase, then the cases moving through committee begin to increase. And that includes consent calendar cases, initial review and formal review, and then that cycle of bi-monthly numbers start to move up and down. So right now we're sitting at a nice level of 90. We know from the audit that we have the ability to move 115 cases through committee if we need to. So we have the ability to move those cases forward, and I believe we're appropriately staffed to do so.
Thank you for that.
Commissioner Hartwig, can you repeat your question
Certainly.
for council regarding the CTC cases that moved to the AG? She's asking if the cases moving to the AG that they call the transcript for and choose not to adopt the ALJ decision, and how those cases move from there.
So I was looking at, thank you very much, and thank you, Council Whitnell, for coming to the table. I'm looking at the table that lets us know what happens to the cases that are opened by the OAG, whether there's a decline to prosecute, et cetera, et cetera. And it includes the proposed ALJ decisions that the commission ultimately adopts. But I was looking for information about the decisions that go through the ALJ process and then the commission does not ultimately adopt. We call for the transcript and issue our own decision, and whether that number was included within this table so that we could track that part of the OAG cases.
Okay, so I'm looking at the table and it does not look like what is here is what the commission is doing. So this is is essentially how the AG adjudicates a matter. So not how the commission adjudicates a matter. So these are the options for cases when they're at the Office of the Attorney General and how they're resolved. So once there's a proposed ALJ decision where you see that number 45, or a consent determination where you see the number 52, or withdraw where the number 15, those are all placed on the commission's consent calendar. So if you reject an ALJ proposed decision and issue your own, at that point their work is finished. So this is all about their work, and we don't track the numbers after that because their work is complete.
Okay, I understand. So the 45 number that I'm looking at here is not the number that we adopted. It is the number that is out of the AG's office hands back onto our table.
Right. When their case is adjudicated on their end, this is how it ended for them.
Okay, thank you. That helps clarify. Okay. Are there any other commissioners who have any follow-up questions or comments? Well, thank you so much, Ms. Kritsafi, for this excellent report. And I would appreciate if you would convey back to the division the gratitude for all the hard work that's done day in and day out to manage this large case flow. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
This is an information item and no action is needed. This concludes the business before the Professional Practices Committee. The committee is adjourned.
Thank you, Commissioner Hartwig. Next is the Certification Committee. Commissioner Simmons, will you please convene the committee?
Good afternoon. Oh, no, it's not afternoon, it's morning. Good morning. I now convene the Certification Committee. The committee has one item before it today. Item 6A is the report to the Legislature on credentialing related to educator assignment monitoring pursuant to Assembly Bill 1219. This is an action item and will be presented by Aaron Skubal and Ann Harris. And this is my second favorite report of the year, right after the teacher supply report. So Ms. Skubal, please begin.
Okay, good morning, commissioners. I'm really glad that leaf blower is no longer going because you're going to need to hear everything that Ann has to say this morning. I'm pleased to present to you item 6A this morning, along with my colleague Ann Harris, who is the program manager over the assignment monitoring unit. This item presents a report to the Legislature on the development and function of the California Statewide Assignment Accountability System, or CalSAS, and it includes the monitoring outcomes for the first full monitoring year and recommendations for improvements for future monitoring. The task of monitoring teacher assignments has come a long way over the past 5 years. And CalSAS has been able to not only modernize and streamline much of the monitoring process, but it has also helped to provide annual teacher assignment data for the first time in California's history. Assignment monitoring is an incredibly complex, intricate process that requires participation from school districts and charter schools, county offices of education, the California Department of Education, and the Commission. This presentation will provide you with an overview of the assignment monitoring process and will present high-level outcomes from the initial year of monitoring as well. I'd like to hand the presentation over to Ann at this time, who has helped not only to oversee assignment monitoring for the past 3 years, but has also played a key role in the development of CalSAS itself. So in other words, she's the expert you want to hear from.
Thank you, Erin. Okay, this is the report to the Legislature on credentialing related to educator assignment monitoring pursuant to Assembly Bill 1219. Just a moment. Great. The assignment monitoring program within the Commission on Teacher Credentialing ensures that certificated educators in California's public schools hold the appropriate credential authorizations for their assignments. Prior to the 2019-20 school year, all of California's educator assignments were monitored within a 4-year cycle, allowing for statewide results only at the conclusion of the 4-year cycle. The demands of the manual paper-based monitoring workload were too laborious for county offices of education to complete annual monitoring. Additionally, aside from the 7 single district counties monitored by the Commission, all other county offices self-reported their monitoring results. There was no central system to ensure consistency or accuracy of monitoring results during this time. This led to county offices of education following disparate monitoring practices and a lack of uniformity in the way assignments were monitored across the state. With the passage of Assembly Bill 1219 in 2019 came several changes to the statewide monitoring of assignments. First, monitoring of certificated educator assignments are now conducted annually, allowing for statewide data every year. Assembly Bill 1219 also charged the Commission with the creation and implementation of an assignment monitoring system. This agenda item is in response to Education Code Section 44258.9K, which requires the Commission to report to the Legislature by December 1st of 2022 details on the development of the California Statewide Assignment Accountability System, or CalSAS, and the results of assignment monitoring. The report details the development of the system, an overview of CalSAS processes, statewide assignment monitoring results, as well as the effectiveness of CalSAS and possible improvements to the monitoring process. In 2017, California committed to providing the Federal Department of Education information on all teacher assignments in California annually as part of California's state plan under the Federal Every Student Succeeds Act, or ESSA. The 2018 Budget Act provided the Commission with authority and funds to create a new assignment monitoring system and enter into a data sharing agreement with the California Department of Education for purpose of partially automating the assignment monitoring process. However, the corresponding statutory changes to provide the Commission with authority to annually monitor all assignments were not provided until the passage of Assembly Bill 1219. Additionally, Assembly Bill 1505 extended monitoring to include charter schools, which were previously given broad flexibility and exempt from monitoring. The development of the CalSAS was completed in 2020. The Commission completed extensive stakeholder engagement, user testing, collaboration with CDE, and resource development efforts prior to the initial 2019-20 monitoring cycle. In 2020, CalSAS launched for the first non-consequential year of assignment monitoring. In 2021, the first consequential assignment monitoring cycle was completed, in which resulting data was able to be publicly available and to be used for CDE's federal reporting requirements. As a result of the monitoring and data sharing, the CDE published their Teacher Assignment Monitoring Outcomes, or TAMO report. The Commission created the California Statewide Assignment Accountability System, which operates through the comparison of CDE's California Longitudinal Pupil Achievement Data System, or CalPADS, assignment data with the Commission's credential authorization data through each educator's California Statewide Educator Identifier, or SEED. The system outputs exceptions through the data comparison, which are instances in which the educator did not hold the authorization that has been identified by the Commission as an appropriate credential for the assignment that was reported in CalPADS. Within the system, users representing school districts, charter schools, state special schools, and county offices of education can indicate why the exception was identified and provide more details on the legality of the assignment. Within the user interface, users may review the exceptions and provide determinations, which are the method used to justify why an exception was identified. They can convey that an assignment was appropriate, misassigned, the result of a CalPADS reporting error, or otherwise legally authorized. This is a collaborative process as the local educational agencies and the entity that serves as the monitoring authority can communicate the justification via text or uploaded documentation within the system. Although LEAs have a year-round responsibility to ensure that their educators are appropriately authorized for their assignments, the comparison within CalSAS occurs with data collected on CDE's CalPADS Fall 2 census date, making assignment monitoring within the system a snapshot in time. CalSAS can only evaluate assignments as they were reported on census date, which occurs on the first Wednesday in October. This is important to note as accuracy in CalPADS reporting plays a key role in assignment monitoring process. The initial CalSAS monitoring cycle was conducted as a non-consequential year pursuant to Education Code 44258.9H, in which resulting data was intended for LEAs, CDE, and the Commission for informational purposes only and was not made publicly available. This allowed users to engage with the system without fear of repercussion, affording them an opportunity to learn how to use the system and find assignment issues to address in preparation for the preceding consequential years. This also allowed the Commission to evaluate the CalSAS processes and make improvements where there were deficits. Several modifications and enhancements were implemented as a result of requests and feedback from users. For the 1920 school year, census date fell on October 2nd of 2019. The Commission received the assignment data from CDE in September of 2020, and the statutory 90 calendar day monitoring period was from October 1st of 2020 through January 1st of 2021. During monitoring, CalSAS processes identified over 150,000 workable exceptions statewide, which were reviewed by approximately 3,800 users in the system. Of these users, 173 represented county offices, a little over 2,000 represented district users, and about 1,500 represented individual charter school users. Though there was no mandate or punitive measures for users to complete monitoring, engagement from the field was strong. Approximately 90% of all exceptions found in the system were addressed by these users. And any exceptions not determined during the monitoring cycle are counted as misassignments at the close of monitoring, resulting in 100% monitoring each year. Slightly over 1/5 of all exceptions in the system were determined by users to be CalPADS errors, or instances in which LEAs indicated that their reporting in CalPADS was incorrect and did not align with the assignment as it existed in the classroom. This determination indicates that there was an error in the CalPADS reporting. However, the educator in the actual assignment on census date was appropriately authorized. Therefore, these exceptions do not reflect negatively upon the LEA, but do represent opportunities for LEAs to improve their CalPADS reporting practices. For the 2020-21 monitoring cycle, the Commission received the CalPADS data from CDE towards the end of the school year, resulting in the monitoring schedule being modified to accommodate LEAs, which were either closed or extremely busy with recruiting, planning schedules, and placing educators in assignments. It was determined that including monitoring to this workload would present an onerous amount of work and overburden the field. Instead, CalSAS was open during the summer months for elective pre-monitoring prior to the statutory 90 calendar day monitoring timeframe being initiated. This additional time for users to review assignments provided LEAs with information on potential misassignments to reference while creating their educators' schedules. The impact of the first consequential monitoring year resulted in additional activity within CalSAS by LEAs. Over 4,500 user roles were present in the system, and approximately 97% of exceptions in the system were determined by users, which is a 7% improvement from the previous cycle. The workable exception count was reduced by 20,000 exceptions, or 13% compared to the previous year, thanks to system enhancements made between monitoring cycles. The resulting data was able to be made publicly available and used for CDE's federal reporting requirements. CDE published their TAMO dashboard on June 30th of this year, and misassignments are one component of the ESSA required categories of educator quality, and therefore they do fall into a category on the TAMO report. Assignment monitoring for the 21-22 school year is currently underway in CalSAS. Like the previous cycle, delayed transmission of CalPADS data resulted in delayed commencement of assignment monitoring. The assignment data from CDE was received during the summer months, and therefore the 90-day timeline is from August 1st through November 1st. Statewide workload was reduced by 3,127 exceptions compared to the previous cycle. Close to 35,000 exceptions were determined in the first 45 days of monitoring. And as of yesterday, October 13th, 97% of exceptions in the system have been determined. Prior to this monitoring cycle, system enhancements were implemented to capture assignments in which English learner services are not being provided when they are required by law. And safeguards have been put in place to prevent the selection of a determination that is not appropriate for the assignment reported in CalPADS. By disallowing determinations that are not aligned with statutory, regulatory, or other credential requirements, this change in the system processing will provide more accurate data when the 2021-22 monitoring cycle concludes. Now we will review some highlights of statewide monitoring results as provided in the report to the legislature. As the 2020-21 was the first monitoring cycle in which results were able to be publicly shared, the next several slides will display the data produced from this monitoring period. Assignment monitoring in CalSAS focuses on whether an educator in the assignment is legally authorized to be in the assignment reported. The lack of a legal authorization for the assignment results in a misassignment. There were close to 31,000 misassigned educators in the 2020-21 school year. Misassignment numbers presented in this report represent assignments in which the educator reported in the assignment did not hold the appropriate authorization for the assignment reported on census date and were not otherwise legally authorized, as well as vacant positions and unmonitored exceptions. Misassignments in this report include the following determinations in CalSAS: misassigned, corrected misassignments, vacancies, unmonitored exceptions, and 2019-20 charter. It's important to highlight that educators can be misassigned to multiple course periods, but will only accrue one misassignment if those course periods are all of the same nature at the same school. Therefore, the number of misassigned courses is exponentially larger than the total number of misassignments. This table provides a comparison of misassigned educators and misassigned courses statewide. In total, there were 71,205 classrooms or course periods in the 2020-21 school year with a misassigned educator. As a point of reference, there were 347,289 educators reported, and there were a little over 1.5 million overall assignments evaluated throughout the state in the 2020-21 monitoring cycle. Those misassigned educators are broken down here by educational setting. Over half of the statewide misassignments are in general education setting, and almost 1/5 are found in English language development settings. Career technical education, or CTE, and special education settings are closer to 10%. And finally, misassignments in services settings comprise 3.8% of all misassignments. It's important to note that this is not a comparison of total assignments. Rather, this table is specific to exceptions that were determined to be misassignments in CalSAS. Data related to statewide assignments can be seen in the CDE's TAMO report. General education courses are offered in departmentalized settings with specific content, such as periods offered in high schools, or self-contained settings that may include any content, such as a full-day classroom in elementary schools. Approximately 44% of all general education misassignments occurred in core academic content areas, including science, English, math, and social sciences. The majority of misassignments occurred in elective courses. This type of course is defined as one that falls outside of the statutory subject areas and includes courses such as homeroom, student government, and study hall. Almost half of the elective misassignments were assignments for one specific CalPADS course code, which is 9229 non-core academic elective. The credentialing requirements for staffing these courses is flexible, as Title V 80005B provides that any teacher who has earned a credential based on a bachelor's degree and student teaching can teach these courses. However, this definition excludes educators teaching on the basis of emergency permits, intern credentials, CTE credentials, and waivers from being appropriately authorized to these courses. Analysis of elective misassignments demonstrates that 44.5% result from an educator holding one of these credentials. A career technical education, or CTE classroom setting, is one in which the curriculum has been designated as technical, trade, or vocational. Currently, there are 15 industry sectors that CTE credentials can be issued in. Displayed is a breakdown of misassigned and vacant courses by CTE industry sector. Arts, media, and entertainment was 29%, and health science and medical technology was 13% of all CTE misassignments. The high percentage of misassignments in these two industry sectors could be the result of some courses within these industry sectors being excluded from utilizing flexibility afforded by Title V 80004C, which allows holders of single subject teaching credentials to teach in CTE settings. Displayed here are statewide special education misassignments broken down by disability area. A teacher must hold a credential to serve each of the disability categories for students in the class as set forth in the Student's Individualized Education Program, or IEP. These are assignments in which the educator did not hold the appropriate authorization for the disability area of one or more students in the class. The most misassigned disability category is autism, followed by orthopedic and speech or language impairment. The latter two are notable because they account for about 50% of all alternative special education placements. The alternate SPED placement determination is selected if the assignment is made on the basis of either the student's IEP assessment and goals for the student's secondary disability area, or on the basis of the IEP's direction to serve them in the least restrictive environment. This determination should only be selected if the student's needs related to their disability area are being met, often by another appropriately authorized individual providing push-in or pull-out services. Therefore, this determination is not a misassignment. If a student is in an alternate SPED placement but is not receiving specialized academic instruction in accordance with their IEP, then the exception would instead be determined as a misassignment. Speech or language impairment was the most common disability area at 34%, and orthopedic impairment was 18% of all alternative special education placement determinations. In California, educators are required to have an appropriate English learner authorization for the level of English language development support needed for their students, even if only one English learner is present in their classroom. The majority of misassignments in English learner services were found in classrooms where students required both integrated and designated ELD services. That would be 2,602 misassignments. Integrated ELDs saw the second most misassignments with 1,343 in total. All of California's currently issued single subject, multiple subject, and special education credentials include preparation to provide integrated and designated ELD services. They do not include preparation to provide departmentalized ELD or bilingual instruction. Some of these misassignments in integrated and designated ELD may include older document holders and teachers prepared in other states or countries who have not yet earned an English learner authorization. Misassignments in the services setting include administrative positions, pupil personnel services, including schools, school counselors, psychologists, social workers. It includes program coordinators, speech and language pathology, school nurse, etc. The other category saw the most misassignments at 38.6% of all services misassignments. This category results entirely from CalPED's course code 6020, other certificated non-instructional assignment. CalSAS does monitor this course because it is certificated. However, the description of the course is too vague to evaluate it against any specific credential authorization. In cases like this, it's the local educational agency's responsibility to review these exceptions and the assignments they represent to determine whether they are appropriate. Because of this, there is no concrete evidence as to what this course code represents or how it is being used across the state. Education Code and Title V regulations provide local educational agencies with educator assignment options that can be used when they are unable to assign a certificated employee with an appropriate credential authorization. These options, known as local assignment options or LAOs, allow flexibility at the local level. In the majority of cases, the educators placed in LAOs should be fully prepared and hold a credential based on possession of a bachelor's degree and student teaching prior to usage. In this way, educators on LAOs are prepared to teach, but not in the subject or curriculum they are assigned to, and these educators are considered to be working out of field. Across the state, there were approximately 121,000 educators placed in assignments based on the usage of local assignment options in a total of about 190,000 classrooms. Note Title V 80005B is excluded from these numbers because it does not represent an educator working out of field, as it's used in elective courses in which there's no subject matter competence. Excluding that LAO, the top most used local assignment options statewide in 2020-21 include Education Code 44865, which accounts for the majority of the LAOs used statewide at 88.9%. This local assignment option is used in alternative settings and allows an employer to broadly assign the holder of a full teaching credential without satisfying subject matter competence. These numbers could be inflated due to reliance on independent study courses as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic protocols, but this cannot be determined without longitudinal data. Education Code 76004 came in second at 4.3%, which allows college instructors to serve students participating in dual or concurrent enrollment programs without requiring the appropriate credential issued by the commission for the assignment. Title V 80020.4 was 2.1% of all local assignment options, and this is related to staff development positions. And Education Code 44258.7 CD is for use in departmentalized elective courses. However, this and the remaining local assignment options are each less than 1% of the total local assignment option determinations. Local assignment option usage across general education subjects are displayed here. Again, excluding Title V 80005B from this analysis. All of the core subject areas represented in the top spots, including social science, English, mathematics, and sciences. Combined, they encompass 63% of the total LAO usage and 70,694 assignments. However, this is with the inclusion of Education Code 44865, which is the local assignment option for alternative settings. Without that LAO, electives occupy the top spot, encompassing 21%. However, it's still trailed directly by the core curriculum areas. While the system is working as intended, some improvements could be made to increase efficiency, accuracy of results, and system functionality. Those include, number one, working towards a uniform set of statutory definitions related to educator assignment data that can ensure consistency and reduce confusion for state agencies that collect and report data on educator assignments. The Commission, CDE, and the State Board of Education all have a unique mandate. However, each of these agencies interconnects in relation to teacher data collection and reporting. The fact that each agency operates under different statutory mandates means that the education code is sometimes disconnected when it comes to definitions related to teacher assignments and licensure. Number two, collecting data within CalSAS related to CalPADS reporting errors. So CalPADS errors have routinely been the largest share of determined exceptions during monitoring. And although CalSAS allows the user to identify assignments as CalPADS errors, it does not have the capability to identify what the properly reported assignment should have been. So this ability would allow CDE to amend their reporting to more accurately reflect assignments and for additional monitoring checks on educators' authorizations within CalSAS. Most importantly, it would allow CDE's TAMO reports to fully evaluate educator fitness, as due to a lack of necessary information, such assignments are currently categorized as incomplete. Being able to capture the actual assignment would resolve this issue and contribute to a more complete picture of California's educator workforce. Number three would be to disaggregate assignments within CalSAS as needed to increase data validity. So to prevent an onerous workload, CalSAS aggregates similar assignments to a single exception based on the educator's seed, CalPADS course or service reported, and the school site. Currently, the system does not have the capability of disaggregating these assignments if it's discovered that one or more assignments were reported inaccurately in CalPADS. For example, an educator could be reported as teaching 3 periods of English, but they're actually teaching 1 English period and 2 social sciences courses. So in this case, the user could discover this within their monitoring, but has no recourse to correct the record. As well, in this example, if the educator is reported, is appropriately authorized in English, but not in social studies, the misassignment determination would be attributed to all 3 courses, which skews the misassignment data. Number 4, improve the monitoring timeline to allow for monitoring to be completed during the same school year. The monitoring timeline is dependent upon when CDE delivers CalPADS assignment data to the Commission. The current data collection timeline guarantees that the Commission will receive the data towards the end of the school year. Fall 2 census date occurs in October. However, the official submission window for monitoring does not close until the following March or April. In the past 2 monitoring cycles, the Commission has received data in May or June. Then the Commission can review, package, and load the data into CalSAS. This timeline presents numerous challenges for local educational agencies as it falls into the summer months when many districts and charter schools are on break. And it is also the busiest time of the year for county offices of education as they're working on acquiring and credentialing staff. Changing the CalPADS submission window to earlier in the school year would allow local educational agencies the ability to act upon their monitoring results during the school year and take corrective actions on misassignments, thus preventing students from being served by misassigned educator for the entire school year. Number 5, CalPADS reporting improvements to increase accuracy and accountability in reporting certificated educator assignments. Currently, there is no legal mandate for local educational agencies to report their data within CalPADS, and no consequences for LEAs intentionally reporting assignments incorrectly. A substantial number of assignments were reported where the teacher's seed is not provided and instead is reported with a placeholder seed of all 9s. This prevents CalSAS from evaluating the educator's credentials for the assignment and is particularly concerning considering these individuals may have never been screened by the Commission for professional fitness or fingerprint clearance. Certification of CalPADS data at the end of the LEA's reporting window is also not required. And if the local educational agencies do not certify their data, then CDE will not transmit the assignment data to the commission, and therefore it cannot be included in monitoring in CalSAS. Having the ability to omit assignments or bypassing monitoring altogether without accountability for doing so results in risk to student safety and data fidelity. In conclusion, since the passage of Assembly Bill 1219 and the creation of CalSAS, assignment monitoring has been completed annually, providing for timely and transparent results, as opposed to the 4-year cycle and inconsistent monitoring process prior to Assembly Bill 1219. Statewide user participation in assignment monitoring process has increased year over year. System enhancements have been implemented in each monitoring cycle to increase accuracy and efficiency of the system. And the Commission plans to launch data dashboards in the coming weeks to publicly display assignment data resulting from the 2020-21 monitoring cycle. And finally, the recommended action is that the Commission approve the Assembly Bill AB 1219 report for transmittal to the Legislature. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. We will now open for public comment. If there are members of the public who would like to give a presentation, please notify the meeting moderator by a request card or by clicking on the raised hand icon if participating through Zoom, or by pressing *9 if participating by phone. Because of the time, we're going to limit comment to 2 minutes. Yeah.
We don't have our timer's not working, so we're going to do that on the honor system.
Okay, sounds good. Recording secretary, are there any public comments?
Yes, Harold Acord.
I'm gonna have you guys keep me honest because I have no idea how long it was taking. Hello, my name is Harold Acord. I'm speaking on behalf of the 300,000 members of the California Teachers Association. When we read this report, we really appreciated all of the data that's shared in here, but we also had the same concern as the final concern that the staff had around the certification of CalPADS data. That's very interesting to us, and it gives us concern about what's happening in those 15 entities, those 15 LEAs, what's happening and how are people actually put into classrooms and how is that being monitored. So we share that same concern. And then our question is, could you remind us what is incumbent upon a holder of a credential who is misassigned? What must they do and when must they do that? How quickly? And what is also the second part of that question is what is incumbent on an administrator who misassigns a teacher? What must they do and within how much time if that happens? Because to our memory, there are some legal requirements for people that are in those situations to comply with. And if that could be reminded for all the commissioners and for the public too, we would appreciate it. Thank you.
Shilpa Ram, please unmute your microphone and share your comment.
Good morning. My name is Shilpa Ram, and I'm a senior staff attorney at Public Advocates. Thank you very much for your thoughtful presentation of item 6A. I have 2 questions for the Commission's consideration, and they're a little bit similar to the comment that was just made by Mr. Acord. First, I was wondering if the proposed timeline for monitoring described in Figure 28 on page 34 was the original timeline that was envisioned prior to the pandemic. And second, while page 1 of the item reminds us that AB 1219 requires LEAs to annually conduct educator assignment monitoring through CalSAS, page 35 of the item reminds us that there's no legal mandate for LEAs to report their data through CalPADS and no consequences for misrepresenting their data. And the item also notes that 15 LEAs didn't certify their data, and your presentation discussed some errors in LEA CalPADS reporting. So given the many stressors facing LEAs across the state, including acute educator shortages and difficulties filling staff vacancies with fully prepared teachers, I wonder if the Commission has considered or explored incentives to encourage LEAs to comprehensively report their data and to do so with fidelity. We greatly appreciate the office hours and presentations that CDE has provided to the public to facilitate greater understanding of the new teacher assignment monitoring outcomes data. And to that end, we wonder if there is outreach that CDE and the Commission could do to encourage LEAs to report their data accurately and completely, even if they have greater numbers of vacancies and misassignments than they would like, and as such may feel some discomfort in thoroughly and comprehensively reporting their data. The public, district leaders, policymakers, and other educational partners rely on complete and accurate LEA reports to understand the quality of California's educator workforce at the state, district, and school level. Thank you for the opportunity to comment, and thank you to the Commission and CDE for your partnership and commitment to greater equity for historically underserved students to date.
Melissa Figueroa, please unmute your microphone and share your comment.
Good morning. I'm Melissa Figueroa, Director of Research at the Education Trust West. On behalf of the Education Trust West, I'd like to thank the Commission for its work to improve the state's system for monitoring educator assignments. These data have the potential to provide valuable insights needed to close racial and socioeconomic equity gaps in access to fully credentialed, appropriately assigned educators. We encourage the Commission and state education leaders to act on the report's recommendations with the urgency our students deserve, beginning with clarifying and aligning statutory definitions for metrics across agencies and data sets, strengthening CalPADS reporting requirements, including taking some of the actions our colleagues at Public Advocates just mentioned, and increasing accuracy of reporting actual assignments to in turn improve the quality of the public-facing TEMO data, as well as improving the monitoring timeline to return results to districts within the same school year and make sure it's truly actionable. Beyond these improvements, we believe it's critical that CalSAS continues to move towards fulfilling its stated goal of contributing to a comprehensive picture of teacher quality by enabling the provision of publicly available data, not just at the FTE, but the educator level where possible, and supporting linkages between misassignment and vacancy data and both student and educator demographic data to better understand equity impacts of misassignments. Thanks for your time and your commitment to ensuring California students have access to effective educators and all of the doors that they can help open.
No additional public comments.
The public comment period for this item is now closed. Do commissioners have any questions or comments on this item? Commissioner Gross.
This item is beautiful, and I know this is one of Commissioner Simmons' favorite reports, but I get really excited whenever we get to talk about special education within the context of all education. And so I very much appreciate your detailed explanation about the misassignments and the alternative placements. And so I had one question and perhaps a correction for Appendix D. So the question is, how do people enter into CalPADS which option the students are alternatively placed? Do you know, I'm just wondering how a staff member would indicate that the student is being served in an alternative placement because of their IEP or because of LRE?
So the data related to alternative placement is actually not coming from CalPADS. The data that's in CalPADS is related to the student disability categories that have been identified. Where the alternative placement comes in is actually within CalSAS. And during that 90-day timeline that Ann talked about, the first 60 days is an opportunity for the LEA to go in and review their exceptions. And anywhere it's a special education exception, meaning the teacher of record does not hold the appropriate credential authorization for the disability categories identified by for the students in the classroom. The LEA has the opportunity to indicate alternative placement as the determination. So what that tells us is this student, yes, the student has a primary disability of X, but the assignment is based on an alternative placement in the IEP. And the monitoring authority, who is the County Office of Education, or for a charter school is the chartering authority, then has an opportunity to review the information given by the LEA and to say, okay, we need you to attach perhaps, documentation that we can verify the indication of this alternative placement. It's really an activity that occurs between the LEA and the monitoring authority, and we don't mandate anything related to that. It's up to the monitoring authority. They have the authority to make that decision on what they need to see from the LEA, but that's where that indication comes in. So, excuse me, it's not reported in CalPADS. It's actually a communication between the LEA and the monitoring authority, which is where we get that alternative placement information.
Okay, that's incredibly helpful. Thank you. It has me wondering if maybe we see such a high percentage for students with speech language impairments because traditionally those students are served in general education and not served in a classroom all day long by a speech language pathologist. So that could be an alternative placement with LRE then. Is that my correct understanding?
Yes, exactly.
Okay. And then my final thing, and this is just because we're sending this to the legislature, in Appendix D, where we have the by regions. I think this was just a click error, but San Diego, where I reside, is located on this appendix in the Sacramento metropolitan Central Valley area. So if we could just relocate that to the South Coast before we send that to the legislature. As someone who has lived in both regions.
Yeah. We would love San Diego to be up here in the Sacramento area, but alas, thank you for pointing that out.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for this report.
Okay, Commissioner Jackson.
Yes, I would like to, on behalf of the California Department of Education, to support this report in item C 6A. And also just to, emphasize that this is really a historical collaboration between the two agencies to allow for this release of data that occurred in June. And it's the first time ever that we now have data that that allows everyone to see the teacher assignment monitoring outcomes. And it's baseline. And I know there's some anxiety out there about this, the data that's out there, but it's baseline, and it's going to really inform everyone's work across the state. And it's also going to inform what's more important, inform how we handle teacher shortages, how we recruit. And I know the California Department of Education looks forward to the continued collaboration between the two agencies going into the future and helping all California educators. So thank you for this report.
Commissioner Clapp.
Thank you. And I just wanted, you set me up perfectly, Commissioner Jackson, for what I wanted to say. And I just want to start though with how much I appreciate how staff really drilled down into the career technical education misassignments, and the analysis there I thought was very helpful, especially the suggestion that schools may be attempting to assign teachers appropriately. And that there, in some of these misassignments, there's general ed teachers who are aligned or adjacent, but just maybe don't have that CTE credential. And I appreciated, as Commissioner Jackson pointed out, that the collaboration between CDE and CTC in trying to figure that out. With that said, like anecdotally, I hear the most, I think, from people in the field who ask me questions about credentials. It's around this area of CTE credentials. And I know we've talked in the past about looking at that bridge between general ed and CTE. I think it's just such a complicated, not only is it complicated from a credentialing standpoint, I think, but just the funding streams that fund career technical education are complicated with layers, I think, of different state funding and federal funding. And so for a school to offer a CTE pathway, it just seems so complicated to figure out who can teach those courses. Will it be funded by all the places that need to fund it? And then especially in a small district, can we create a full-time assignment for a teacher when we might only be able to offer a couple sections of this elective? And so I know that we had the work group that met, I'm trying to think how many years ago that was, 5 years? The career technical education, we had the series of work group meetings, and I attended those, and I walked away from it just thinking what a huge lift it will be for us to resolve some of those problems. And so I appreciate what you said about the collaboration, because I don't think we can do it here. I think the legislature has to be part of that too. And so I guess my appreciation is for the analysis and how you called that out in this, because I think it's so important, but also just a kind of question about, is there anything on the horizon that would give us hope that we will finally figure out the CTE conundrum? So that's maybe an aspirational question. I don't know, but clearly I think this report shows that it's an issue. So thank you for letting me think out loud there.
Aaron, there have been some fixes to CTE. Could you go over those more recent changes, maybe?
Give me a hint of what you're talking about.
Well, it was like, it used to be that if you were a bus driver, you could get a CTE credential in avionics, whereas if you were a physics teacher, you couldn't.
There was some realignment of the industry sectors. You said recent, so you threw me off with that. I think that was about 5 or 6 years ago, which feels like an eternity to me.
At my age.
Yeah, there was a realignment of industry sectors. And I think with CalSAS and the new attention to monitoring, there is more attention being made to who is in those classrooms. And we have had conversations with, the CTE consortium groups around, what LEAs need at the local level and what the roadblocks are for them. And very similar, to what you're saying, Commissioner Klatt. I think that we've had a lot of internal conversations about, what the assignment data is telling us, and looking at who the teachers are in those assignments, and really, seeing that LEAs, again, are trying to do the right thing, and they're putting teachers in these assignments that have knowledge in the content area that's being taught. But the way our credentialing structure works is that they're very siloed. So there's no crossover from a CTE setting into a general education setting. There's not really crossover from a general education setting into a special education setting. And that's a construct of decades of credentialing law. And we know that that's not really how the real world is working for LEAs at the local level. So with this data, it's going to give us something that we can present to say, okay, it's not quite working the way it was intended to work 20, 30, 40 years ago. And so what can we do and what changes can we make to, embrace the new state of education and the way assignments are being, placed at the local level.
And Aaron, correct me if I'm wrong, but a lot of those issues are not even state credential issues. They're Perkins issues.
Definitely Perkins funding is part of the factor in there related to who an LEA can place in an assignment to ensure that they get that Perkins funding. Yeah.
I think the executive director has a comment.
I'd like to respond, Commissioner Klatt, to yes, there is hope that we are going to get back to this. With the renewal of the state's Perkins plan, which occurred a couple of years ago. I can't remember exactly what the date was. We were working closely with staff at the Department of Education to look at how the state could frame expectations for staffing in CTE that would set the table for improving the credentialing process and availability of credential holders who are well suited and prepared to work in CTE. Some of the work around that has slowed down a bit due to pandemic, urgencies, and everything got deferred a little bit while we did that. But it is on our work plan. It's on the horizon, and really quite critical, especially given the new funding that is flowing in to expand career technical education opportunities. It needs a credentialing solution that will help to help local education agencies get these programs uplifted the way they need to be. So it's on our work plan. Director Scooble and Director DeGeer have been working together on this, and I hope in the next couple of meetings we will have an update for you as to what might be next and what could be next. Definitely working closely with our colleagues at the Department of Ed who monitor this so closely.
Okay, I think on this topic. Okay, go ahead.
Just a quick PS, that part of the CTE work has been done historically by the community colleges who also work with the Perkins plan. So as we move forward, keep the community colleges in mind. We do a lot of that work, and we teach a lot in the high schools.
Okay, Commissioner Redia.
I want to say thank you for this report. I think one of the things that at first it's kind of alarming when you see this, when you see some of the numbers and the misassignments. And I know that as a school board member, that's one of the things that we're always kept apprised of, by our superintendent. And, what are the numbers and how many people are we having these assignments, and how long will it be temporary till we find someone, especially in the career tech, that. So I'm hopeful. I think a lot of the information in here is information that we suspected, that we thought, but the report then confirms what we were hypothesizing about. And so I'm hopeful that we use this information to begin to look at teacher preparation, recruitment of teachers in our schools, in our universities, but also begin to really have the conversation about putting credentialed teachers in front of students. And so how is that, how do we do that, and the urgency, and begin to look at that. So when I began to look at some of this data, I think it was on page 14, what just a question that came up, that I thought about was, when you look at this, this map, it looks like, obviously the regions with, in the darkest areas here, I gotta put my glasses on, sorry. Like in San Bernardino and San Diego, I know looks like they have the highest concentration of misassignments. But what I don't know is that I don't know what's the proportion of those misassignments to the proportion of the ADA and in districts. So that would give me kind of a better idea, because when you see a total number, it looks like, oh, wow, they're, but when you look at, look at it in terms of proportion to the number of students, it still might be oh, wow. But the thing is that at least we might get a clearer, a more definite number here, so that we better understand that. So that's just a suggestion.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Martinez.
Hey there. Thank you, staff, for this great report. A little bit like Commissioner Simmons, These are the fun ones when we get to look at the data and look at the trends and ask you guys lots of questions. Building a little bit on really Ed Trust and public advocates questions around equity. And I think maybe Commissioner Jackson referenced this. Do we have trend line data for that map? The counties, like Commissioner Redditt is just talking about, like, can we do comparison by year to see if that misassignment's improving, increasing, decreasing? So that's my first question. And then my second question is really about, like, I understand the misassignments at high school level, single subject, CTE, all of that. I was wondering what the most common misassignment was for elementary school. I think I maybe heard you say English language development, or maybe it was special ed. So those are two questions. I have one more, and that's it.
So to answer your first question, this is our first year of full consequential monitoring data that we're presenting. So while we don't have trend line data that we could use for comparing counties year over year, that is definitely something that we can begin to do as future monitoring cycles result in future data. So yeah, absolutely, that's something that we can look to do in the future. Any insight on the second question, Anne? Which
about the misassignments at the
as far as misassignment, I would speculate that it's likely self-contained classroom setting, and it's just the standard multiple subject credential required. But at the elementary school level, we're going to be looking at English learner services. We're going to be looking at special education services. We're going to be looking, at even departmentalized physical education or music courses that are taught at the elementary school level. Those do require a single subject credential. So while we don't have that data for you right now, that is definitely something that we can dig deeper in the future.
Okay. And then my last question, and this is what you guys all get since I've been quiet on Zoom last couple of days. So this is a fun question, and it could be for you, Aaron, or it could be for Executive Director Sandy. So one of the recommendations and wishes you have for the legislation is systems improvement. And so if you could wave your magic wand, what are 2 or 3 things on this wish list that you would like around systems improvement?
I think that the biggest deficiency that we have right now, I would say 2 things. Number one is the timeline. So we know that it can be a burden for LEAs to work on this monitoring process, in August and September when they're trying to start their next new school year, and we're asking them to look back at the previous school year. So I think improvements in the timeline would really make a huge difference, not only for their workload, but for us to be able to look at the data in the same school year in which the teacher was placed in that assignment. So we're looking at assignments from October of 2021 now in October of 2022. And the census date for the next monitoring cycle is already here. It's already past the first Wednesday in October. So I think that the improvements in the timeline, would be amazing. CalPADS was not created to do assignment monitoring. So, through no fault of the timeline for CalPADS, we're just in this situation where our system now relies on that data, but it wasn't created for us. It was created for a different purpose. So now that we have our first year of data and we can, take a look at what improvements that timeline might make for us, we can perhaps work together with the legislature and CDE to improve that process. And I think, along with that goes, the kind of, again, more collaboration related to teacher assignment data definitions and around requiring LEAs to participate in the process. Now, I know that can be challenging because when you have a mandate on an LEA, that causes problems. But if there's not required participation, then there's not a requirement for an LEA to certify their data. Then, as Anne said, we don't receive any assignment data for that LEA. So if they choose not to certify, we don't receive anything from them. We do not have the ability to look at any of their assignments for that school year. So I think those would be my magic wand wishes.
Yeah, those are wonderful. And it also supports what the public advocates was asking around the requirements. Executive Director Sandy, do you have any that you would add?
No. I think that Director Scooble has summarized it well.
Yeah, thank you for the work and for the answers to the questions.
Chair Sloan?
Thank you. So as Commissioner Jackson said, one important thing about these reports is that they inform our work. And I know that there are a couple of questions I have, not necessarily about how the data is reported, although I really appreciate all of your insights into systems improvement. That seems very important. But there was a question raised at the table by Mr. Acord, and I have another question as well. I don't know if this is a space for you to answer that, but let's see how complicated it is. So Mr. Acord asked, if an educator is misassigned, what is required from that educator and or administrator to repair?
So I'm going to start, and then I think Anne has some information she'll be able to add. So there is statutory language around teacher assignments. Now, one thing to note is that a teacher must consent to an assignment. That is their legal right. They have the legal right to consent to the assignment that they're placed in. And superintendents and school sites are also legally responsible for placing an appropriately assigned educator in an assignment. In the case of a misassignment, there is statutory language that addresses that in our section of Ed Code that authorizes assignment monitoring. So, Anne, if you want to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so in Education Code 44258.9, this section is, sorry about that.
It's a long section of statute.
Trying to see here.
Could you repeat that number again, please?
44258.9. The section is E9. That outlines that an administrator is required to advise that the assignment be corrected within 30 calendar days. And for a charter school, that would be the responsibility of the charter school's monitoring authority, which is the chartering authority for the charter school.
So as we know, if it's 30 calendar days from the date that the assignment is identified as a misassignment. Now, if we're already in the next school year when we identify that assignment as a misassignment, you can imagine that there's no way. I mean, obviously the intent would be you don't place them in the misassignment again for the following school year. But also there can't be penalties placed on a teacher who is in a misassignment. So no recourse on their evaluations. They can't, negative evaluations can't be used against a teacher who's placed in a misassignment. So there is a law that protects a teacher who's placed in a misassignment in those situations. But again, it is the responsibility of the administrator for the district to ensure appropriate placement.
Now, if they lack a credential altogether, though, the consequence is that the county office cannot prepare a pay warrant for them, correct?
Correct. And an instance where an individual is in an assignment but does not hold any credential, that's considered a vacancy. So that would be an instance where there is no credentialed teacher in that assignment, and it would be a vacancy. And yes, the county can't obviously pay for that assignment.
So in the case of expired credentials, what are the recourses for employees, for teachers?
So if a teacher is in an assignment and their credential lapses, there is a process that you all actually see on your consent calendar where you are authorizing that individual for that gap in service. So if they were eligible to renew their credential, it got away from them, they forgot to renew, they served for 3 months on an expired credential, and then they realize it, their district informs them they need to renew. There is a process that the district can go through with the commission, and you all act on the consent calendar to approve those assignments so that that teacher can be paid.
But that's limited to teachers, correct? So if you're a service provider, administrative services, et cetera, then you would just be out of luck.
Yep, that's correct.
Okay, thank you. My second question has to do with EL authorization and table 16 and 17 on page 25. And again, in the spirit of informing our work, My question has to do with what certification is required for teaching in an integrated ELD versus designated ELD, compartmentalized ELD.
Can you say the first part again?
What certification is required for each of those settings?
So for teaching credentials, there are 3 types of well, really there's 4, but for general education teaching credentials, there's primarily 3 types of English learner authorizations. So there's our more limited English learner authorizations that are earned through the teacher preparation program in California. So that authorizes the teacher to provide integrated and designated ELD services within the content area authorized by their credential. So if it's a multiple subject teacher with this limited English learner authorization, they can do integrated and designated ELD within their self-contained classroom setting. And same would be if they're a single subject teacher within their departmentalized classroom setting.
And under 2042, all teachers coming out of those programs
That is
should have
correct.
that.
All California preparation programs prepare teachers to earn that authorization. There's also the CLAD authorization, which is the more broad English learner authorization. And that's earned through completion of the CTEL program or CTEL examinations, or a combination of both. And that allows the teacher to do both that integrated and designated ELD within their classroom setting. It also authorizes them to do departmentalized ELD, so standalone ELD, where they are just in a classroom providing English learner services as the primary instruction. There's also the World Languages ELD single subject credential that has the exact same authorization.
Can I stop you there? So the CLAD certification can be used in secondary ELD contained classrooms?
Yes, in a departmentalized ELD
I
classroom.
didn't realize that. I thought it was just the World Languages. Okay.
Yeah. And then the full broad English learner authorization is the bilingual authorization, of course, and that authorizes the teacher to do all of that integrated, designated, departmentalized, and to teach in a primary language.
Okay. So it is concerning to me then that the integrated and designated category is so high, when for a very long time now we have been preparing teachers who should be certified to teach in these areas. Do you have an explanation for why that might be such a high misassignment?
Yeah, primarily those would be teachers who, as Anne said, either hold a credential that was issued prior to SB 2042, so they don't have that English learner authorization embedded. Although I will say California employers have really done an excellent job at requiring pretty much all their teachers to get that English learner authorization. It could also be out-of-state prepared educators. So when out-of-state prepared educators come to California, they're issued a preliminary credential, and they do not have an English learner authorization on that credential unless the state they're coming from has given them a comparable English learner authorization. So the majority of teachers that come from out of state do not have a comparable English learner authorization, and so we issue them a preliminary without an EL authorization. We require them to complete English learner preparation prior to the issuance of their clear credential. Now, in reality, the majority of California classrooms have one or more English learners in them. So when they are placed in assignment, if their employer does not obtain what we call an emergency English learner permit, they're misassigned for English learner services. It's a matter of the employer getting that emergency permit to cover them for those services while they work towards completion of that English learner requirement that they need for their clear credential. So that's the majority of what we believe those misassignments are. It may also be career technical education preliminary credential holders, because they're in a similar situation where they earn their 3-year preliminary CTE credential. And as they do the requirements for the clear, they complete the English learner preparation. And so again, if the employer doesn't get that additional document to authorize them for English learner services while they complete preparation, they're misassigned if they have English learners in their classroom.
Aaron, do you think that there could be some misreporting because employers are not using the regrouping and the team teaching within the?
Yeah, definitely. There's always a factor where it could be, again, the reporting done for CalPads isn't reflective of what's happening in the classroom. And LEAs do have the opportunity to report a CalPads error if that's the case. So these are the assignments that come through where they did not report a CalPads error, and they're saying that what was reported in CalPads was accurate and it's indeed a misassignment.
All right, thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Davis.
Good morning, and thank you so much for a thorough report and presentation. I don't know, I'm from Santa Clara County, so I live there and I work there, and I feel remiss if I didn't kind of explain what it's like to live in Santa Clara County, which might explain being one of the highest represented groups on the misassignment list. We have declining enrollment countywide, and I know Commissioner Cruz could probably speak to this as well. And we have, some of the highest costs of living there. So it makes it very, very difficult to find teachers qualified in all of these various credential areas. And what further complicates it, and this isn't necessarily a bad thing, but our seniority rules and our collective bargaining agreements make it very tricky and complicated to just kind of get folks kind of put in the right places sometimes. And that might explain some of this. But I wanted to go back to that scenario you talked about, which was very intriguing to me, about the misassignment being reported at the end of a school year and then maybe falling into the fall, no pun intended there. When a teacher, and I know how, because I'm a member of CTA, how collective bargaining rules work, but could an educator potentially be terminated from a position in the fall in that scenario that you talked about where, they started misassignment at the end and then they were put in that same situation in the fall? And then if the LEA doesn't have funding or a position available, that creates another problem.
That's a really good question. So I will say that the commission has a credentialing solution for almost every scenario. So if we're dealing with a fully prepared teacher who is teaching outside of their content area, we very likely have a solution that would make that assignment legal, and therefore they would not need to be removed from the assignment. Now, there are very, very few instances where that would not be the case, and the ending result may be the need to remove a teacher from that assignment, but those are very, very rare cases. We can almost always provide a certificated solution for individuals in those assignments. And really, a lot of times it's just planning ahead for the LEA, because as Anne pointed out, that table with all those local assignment options, she only highlighted the top 4, but you saw that table has probably 15 local assignment options. Those are, legal authority and statute for an LEA to assign a teacher outside of their credential area to serve. And those are not misassignments, and that teacher is appropriately authorized. And so it does require a little bit of planning and a little bit of thinking ahead. But that's why, doing the assignment monitoring within that school year to know, oh, this teacher was misassigned. In the fall, I need to make sure that I get them on that local assignment option to cover them. And, they can do that annually if they need to.
Thank you for that. And then I wondered, and this is just a wondering, not necessarily something that needs to be changed about the report in the future, but could these economic factors and circumstances maybe have a passing mention in the report? And this is why I say that. I've lived in 3 different counties in California, and I've worked in 5 different counties in California. And I know the economic factors, the stratification of folks in different communities. Sometimes it makes a difference. Generally where I live now, the folks in the valley tend to be on the lower end of the economic spectrum, and the people who live in the mountains and the hills tend to be, the opposite. So, and we know that in sometimes in California, in the poorer communities, there are a lot more students or a lot more children in those communities than the others. So I don't know if that helps or makes a difference, because again, I know that Santa Clara County is that unique unicorn that doesn't kind of fit into that whole category because of the declining enrollment and the other economic factors that don't exist everywhere else, which creates a situation where they are, or we are, I should say, the representing the highest number of folks on the list.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner De La Torre.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner Simmons. I had a question about the misassignments. If a position is unfilled, is that considered a misassignment as well?
It is. So it's a special kind of misassignment. Special is maybe not the right word. It's a specific type of misassignment, and it is a vacancy. So if it goes unfilled, then it's a vacancy, and it's also a misassignment. But that would be the case when there is a classroom reported. An interesting, thing to think about is that we don't have a way to look at the number of classrooms that don't get created because of a lack of teachers. So we don't have a way to say, where an LEA may have wanted to, have 4 third grade classrooms, they're only able to have 3, and they need to, keep their number of students in that classroom higher than they want to, because they're unable to find a 4th teacher. So we don't have a way to look at that. But yeah, if it is not filled, if there is a classroom that, on census day, the first Wednesday in October, they don't have a credentialed teacher and say they have a substitute in that assignment, that would be considered a vacancy, which is also a misassignment.
Okay, because I know that in Los Angeles, there are a lot of unfilled positions that are filled by emergency credential teachers or long-term subs. So those would all be considered misassignments. Is that correct?
If the assignment is filled by an emergency credentialed teacher, then it's not a misassignment. So a misassignment only occurs when the individual serving in the classroom does not have the appropriate authorization to serve those students. And an emergency credential does allow that individual to serve those students. Where you would be able to look at data like that would be in CDE's Teacher Assignment Monitoring's outcome report. That looks at the level of preparation that the teacher in the assignment holds. So while it's not considered a misassignment, you could look at how many classrooms have an underprepared teacher with a provisional internship or short-term staff permit serving.
So long-term subs would still count as a misassignment.
It depends. That's always our answer. It depends on if that long-term sub is holding a commission-issued document that authorizes them, or if they're serving on a substitute permit. If they're serving only on a substitute permit, then that would be considered a misassignment.
Okay, thank you.
Well, and I think it depends on the definition of long-term also.
Correct. Yep.
Okay, we're going to wrap this up, but I have a couple of questions if that's, oh, no, we're not going to wrap it up. Okay.
I will try to make this quick. The first thing I want to offer thanks and also just recognize what an important step this is in our overall evolution of access to more data and better data. And that's something, I've been sitting on the commission 4 years now, and I know this has been going on for longer than that under Director Sandy's guidance and urgency of us being able to have access to greater data. So this is a huge step in that direction, and I want to return thanks to the CDE for the collaboration that's made this happen. This is really important data. And I sit on the commission as one of the public members, and so I try to look at these items thinking about what would a member of the public think when they look at this. As Ms. Ram noted at the end, at the conclusion of her comments, this is a very important step forward in terms of thinking about equity across our system. And so I want to recognize that and thank you for helping develop this tool that's going to help us think about equity across the system. I did want to follow up on Commissioner Heredia's request about ratio data and second that request. You know, if I was a member of the public looking at this report, my eyes might be drawn most quickly to the map of the state, because that's something easy, you know, to understand and look for my county. And of course, when you look at this and you see that Los Angeles County, you know, accounts for 25.6% of the overall misassignments in the state, that is extremely alarming. But of course, we would have a better sense of what that meant when we had a ratio of how many educators work there and how many students are within that district. So that I would second that request, that we be able to have some of that ratio information provided. And then I did just want to follow up on one question of Ms. Ram's, which had to do with the situation we're in where we don't have a legal mandate for reporting. And so are there other tools that the commission has available to it in terms of, is there additional outreach that we can do? Are there incentives that, I don't know that we have incentives, but are there any other tools that we can use while hopefully we will get some more legal requirements in place? I'm not sure what's being done already, but is there any more room for action in that space?
So the team, both at the commission and at CDE, have done a tremendous amount of outreach to prepare LEAs, county offices, monitoring authorities for not only the monitoring that's been taking place over the past several years, but for the release of the data and making sure they understand, you know, that this will be the first time we're shining a light on statewide data related to teacher assignments. While it's really challenging to identify incentives, I mean, I think that a primary incentive would be to not see your name on the list of counties or districts that did not provide data to CDE. You know, I think that's really all we have at this point, is to ensure we do outreach to those LEAs that weren't able to certify. And it, you know, in all fairness, it's very likely that they just didn't have an understanding of the fact that if they didn't certify, then we wouldn't be able to monitor, and therefore they would be, you know, identified as not being monitored. So just to ensure the education of the field and that, you know, they are aware of the outcome of the decision to not certify their data.
Thank you very much.
Aaron, in the old system, the commission would send shaming letters to the school board. Is that still an option?
We do require monitoring authorities to participate. That is mandated in the education code, that the monitoring authority must participate. There is no similar mandate for the LEA. So the district or the charter school does not have to participate. Now, the outcome of not participating means that all of your assignments that are identified as exceptions turn into misassignments at the end of the monitoring cycle. So they definitely have an incentive to participate there to ensure that they, you know, can continue to clean up some of their assignments where we are missing data on the nature of those assignments. But we do send, you know, CalSAS notifications to users who are not participating, and we'll send notifications, you know, as the 90-day period moves through. If we see that LEAs aren't working their exceptions, we will send them notifications. If we see that county offices are not participating, we will send the superintendent letters. So yeah, we do communicate significantly with those LEAs.
Okay, Commissioner Cruz.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for this great report. I mean, from a district standpoint, and I'll echo Commissioner Heredia's comments in terms of when we provide this type of data publicly, it creates some anxiety. And so part of that is, then what do we do with this information, right? I think as we've been talking about, you know, what does this tell us about what are the conditions out there in the field and what are the needs? And then what are we going to do about that? Because as districts, we know when we have a misassignment in most cases, because of the realities that we've just talked about in terms of the teacher shortages and the challenges that we have in terms of filling those. So then it can't feel punitive. It can't feel like we did something wrong if we don't have access to the workforce. And so I think part of that is, how do we frame the conversation based on this data that then gives us some actions as a state to say, then what are we going to do to improve this? And so I think part of that is a little bit of anxiety from a district standpoint and from a community that sometimes has misassignments for not just having access to the workforce that is needed.
Okay, Commissioner Reddy.
So I just want to follow up real quick, from a district point of view. I was glad to see that my district wasn't on the list. That's the first thing I went to next to committee members here. But even if we were, I know we'd work hard to do whatever, ensure, we resolve our misassignments here. But I do think, that we have to remember that this data is so good for us in the sense that, again, as I said, it confirms what we know. We have the data, but I also think it's the leverage that we need in order to go to the legislature and say, here is the situation, here's the data, as opposed to anecdotal information. So I think we need to look at it in that sense. It's like, here it really is. So, we instead of having to knock on your door, 10 times, maybe we'll knock on your door 3 times, because, and here's our evidence here. But I also think, and looking at this is, for me, there's such an urgency, because when you look at the groups of students where there are missed assignments, these are the very students that we're trying to uplift. These are the students that we keep saying, we're working to, make sure that there's access, there's equity, and we've got to make sure that they have access to well-prepared teachers. And, but also just the fact that, our efforts to lift these students up, can potentially be diminished without the people with the right credentials in front of them. So in that sense, it's an urgency for me to say, what do we do? How do we do it? And ensure that school districts then find ways to find the proper people to be in front of our kids. Thank you.
And I also, speaking as somebody from a district, it's not an easy system to work. I know I had, I think, 5 classrooms that were listed as misassignments. And when I got that, I went on the commission website. I said, look, every one of the, I figured out, like, they have the proper assignment for what the class is, whether it was they had the autism authorization or they had Mod Severe. It was like, no, we did this right. And then the county office told us, but you reported it as gen ed. So it was like, well, never mind. Because it was our error in terms of the reporting. So that is, that happens. But I had a question, which I hope will be like the last one. Okay. Okay. On figure 18 and table 5, are those, is figure 18 included in table 5, or is table 5 just for teaching? That's the special ed ones.
So figure 18 is the services misassignments?
Yes. So like if because you have speech and language in figure 18, which is services, and I'm assuming that table 5 is speech and language in terms of teaching.
Here's table 5. I don't believe so. And correct me if I'm wrong, but in CalPADS, services assignments are given a different category when they report the assignment than teaching assignments. So there is an indicator in CalPADS that indicates if it's a service assignment or a teaching assignment. And so I believe that those are different data sets. They're coming from different reporting sources.
So the only way that speech language impairment, the student who has speech language impairment, could be properly taught, if that was what the class was, would be if they had a SLP with a special class authorization. Is that correct?
No, because it's still special education services, but it's classroom based versus administrative based. Really, that's the indicator that they report in CalPADS. It's either a non-classroom based service assignment or it is a classroom based assignment, teaching or service provided.
Now, I know several years ago, and this was a long time ago, there was discussion about having some kind of forum to talk about the lack of SLPs that we have in this state. And just because of all the different stuff that happened, we never got around to that. But I think there really is still a extremely desperate lack of speech language pathologists in the state. And I'm wondering, is there any, which may be more not for you, but for someone else, is there any way that we can maybe help address that or help that conversation?
I do know that there's specific statutory requirements for speech language pathologists as a services credential. So it's definitely something that the legislature could investigate and look into if they wanted to amend the statutory requirements for that credential and create some flexibilities there.
And I also wanted to ask again with Table 5, when we moved to the 2042 credentials away from the Ryan, that really should have addressed a lot of our ELD issues, because then the training for ELD and SEDI was included within the credential. Can you speak to the recent changes to special education and how that might impact the misassignments in special ed?
Yeah, so the new special education credentials for specifically mild, moderate support needs and extensive support needs, the disability areas that each of those authorizations authorize have been broadened. So whereas mild, moderate, and mod severe were more narrow in the disability categories that they were authorized to serve, the mild, mod support needs and extensive support needs has been broadened. But on top of that, we've added another layer about the authorization, which is the support needs of the students. So while mild, mod support needs and extensive support needs mirror each other for the most part as far as what disability categories they authorize, it also specifies that the mild, mod support needs obviously is for students who need less support. The extensive support needs is for students who need more support. Now, the way CalPADS collects their data from LEAs is solely based on the disability category of the student. And so CalSAS will continue to assess assignments, whether the teacher has the old authorization or the new special ed authorization solely on the disability category of the student. So we're not going to be looking at the support needs at this time. CalPADS needs some system enhancements and some additional data collection elements in order for us to be able to assess the support need level of the student. And so that we are in conversations with CDE about what that would look like and what changes would be needed to the system in order for us to assess on that level. But initially, we will continue to assess those assignments on the disability categories of the students. So it should reduce the number of misassignments, in the current term for those newly credentialed teachers.
And I think it's important to say that the reason why it will reduce the misassignments is because those new teachers are getting better training or more extensive training in wider areas.
Yep.
So it's not just a reporting issue. It's really is we've improved the training.
Yep.
And on that, I think, unless you have anything to add, Ann, Aaron?
No, you have heard me talk enough.
Then I would entertain a motion to approve Assembly Bill 1219 and report for transmittal to the legislature.
With the modification for San Diego County.
Yes. With thanks to Commissioner Gross. Ready and moves. Oh, Commissioner Gross. Was that a motion, Commissioner Gross?
Yes.
Okay, so we will, in honor of San Diego County, we will give it to Commissioner Gross. And do we have a second? Commissioner Greno-Shire has seconded. And further discussion? Seeing none, will the recording secretary call for the vote? Each member please respond with aye, nay, or abstain.
Danette Brown,
Aye.
Jose Cardenas,
Aye.
Juan Cruz,
Aye.
Christopher Davis,
Aye.
Michael De La Torre,
Aye.
Marisol De La Torre Escobedo,
Aye.
Makita Guino Shire,
Aye.
Megan Gross,
Aye.
Johanna Howick,
Aye.
Susan Aradia,
Aye.
Terry Jackson,
Aye.
Bonnie Clark,
Aye.
Monica Martinez,
Aye.
David Simmons,
Aye.
Tina Sloan.
Aye.
Motion carries.
So thank you very much. We really do appreciate that, Ms. Scooble and Ms. Harris. So having no additional items today, I adjourn the certification committee.
Thank you, Commissioner Simmons. We're going to take a break. Can we come back to the table at 11:15? Because I know you have break creep and it may end up being 11:17, but try for 11:15.